Welcome to the final act in our not-so-sparkly Valentine to Romanticism, a movement that gave us poetry soaked in moonlight and melancholy, dreams dressed up as destinies, and emotions inflated to operatic proportions. We've admired it, poked fun at it, and rolled around in its velvet-draped grandeur. But now, we need to have a little chat. Because today, we're flipping the mirror. Yes, Romanticism gave us beauty, it gave us soul, but it also gave us permission, too much permission, to equate our feelings with facts, our perception with truth, and our fleeting whims with eternal significance. So let's bring it home. Today's episode is The Reckoning. Let's explore the paradox of Romanticism. You might be thinking, hold up, didn't we just spend 3 whole episodes celebrating emotional authenticity and the raw expression of the inner self? Why, yes. Yes, we did. And now we're going to do something Romanticism never liked to do. We're going to question itself. Romanticism, for all its emphasis on truth and beauty, often blurred the lines between feeling something deeply and that feeling being true. It glorified the subjective, the personal, the instinctual. And in doing so, it flirted with a dangerous lie that because I feel something intensely, it must therefore be real, right, and even righteous. But here's the rub. Feelings are not facts. Romanticism didn't invent emotional reasoning, but it definitely gave it a press kit. In an age emerging from cold Enlightenment rationalism, the poets of the 19th century wanted to break the mold, and they did, by tossing the mold into a stormy sea of passion, idealism, and mood swings. The paradox is this: in seeking deeper truth, Romanticism made truth entirely personal. In rejecting stale intellectualism, it embraced emotional impulsivity. The movement that claimed to honor the soul sometimes just handed the keys to the ego. It created a world where personal truth trumped shared reality. And here we are, 2 centuries later, still drunk on that very idea. Let's talk about truth, the kind that exists whether you feel it or not. The kind that stands tall, even when your emotions throw a tantrum. Cultural relativism, while cozy and fashionable, is a seductive spiral. It tells us there's no right or wrong, just perspectives. That morality is a social construct, that truth is elastic, and that lived experience trumps all. And to be clear, lived experience matters. But when it becomes the only metric for truth, you've untethered it from reality. That's not justice, that's solipsism. In a relativistic world, a person can destroy their marriage, ghost their friends, and justify it all by saying, I'm living my truth. Oscar Wilde, that delightful, flamboyant firebrand of paradox, once said, man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth. Wilde understood something. That self-perception is murky, fragile, and often wrong. He used satire to slice through narcissism and peel back the layers. But here's what's rarely discussed. Wilde didn't stay in that relativistic fog. Later in life, after enduring scandal, betrayal, and prison, he turned to Christianity. He found in faith what he had missed in fame, the solidity of truth, not rooted in the self. His final published work, De Profundis, written from prison, is a deeply emotional, yet startlingly lucid reflection on suffering, humility, and spiritual clarity. Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground. The man who once mocked the world with irony came to see the limitations of living purely for feeling and expression. And perhaps in that contradiction, we find the very essence of the truth we're trying to reclaim. Not every poet bought into the full romantic delusion. Some saw the danger and pulled back the curtain. In Four Quartets, T.S. Eliot writes, "The only wisdom we can hope to acquire is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless." Eliot recognized that emotional certainty can be a form of arrogance. Real truth, he said, comes not from passion but from quiet surrender to the eternal. He knew that chaos, unmoored from moral clarity, creates not freedom, but fragmentation. In Ash Wednesday, Eliot writes, "Because I do not hope to turn again, because I do not hope to turn." This isn't despair, it's surrender, an abandonment of self-driven narrative for a more transcendent one. Eliot lived at the border of Romanticism and modernism, but crossed into territory that Romanticism feared: submission. W.H. Auden, in September 1, 1939, captures the dangers of personal delusion in a world on the brink. "All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie, the romantic lie in the brain of the sensual man in the street and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky." He ends with that unforgettable line, "We must love one another or die." But even Auden recoiled later at how emotionally simplistic that sounded. Because love is not just a feeling, it's an act, a discipline, a moral decision. And then there's George Herbert, far less fashionable but far more grounded. In The Elixir, he writes, "A servant with this clause makes drudgery divine, who sweeps a room as for thy laws, makes that in the action fine." This isn't emotional excess, it's the sacred ordinary. Herbert ties the act of devotion not to what one feels, but to what one chooses. Yes, this stance might seem ironic and even hypocritical, especially after celebrating the Romantic era's lyrical glorification of human feeling. But here's the twist. The ability to critique something from within its legacy is the mark of maturity. Romanticism was a necessary rebellion, a swing of the pendulum away from the sterility of Enlightenment rationalization. It gave breath to beauty, dignity to the individual, and voice to the soul. But like all revolutions, it eventually began to devour its own ideals. In Romanticism's thirst for depth, it began drawing from shallow wells, making emotion the foundation instead of the lens. It mistook sincerity for truth, passion for principle. It replaced the rigid structures of reason with the chaotic improvisation of feeling, and in doing so, often sacrificed clarity for catharsis. And this is the cultural inheritance we've yet to unpack. We live in a world where the self has become the ultimate authority, where we equate feeling right to being right, where the language of authenticity is used to justify everything from the noble to the narcissistic. Romanticism dethroned cold objectivity and placed the individual experience on the altar, which sounds empowering, until you realize that it almost dismantled shared reality in the process. What began as an exploration of inner life turned into a doctrine of personal sovereignty where truth is treated as bespoke, custom-fitted to our emotions like a well-tailored coat. And here's the real paradox. A movement that longed for transcendence ended up chained to the self. It handed us the vocabulary of the spirit, but severed it from the grammar of truth. The soul was set free to speak, but often with no one listening but itself. But it doesn't have to end there. It is possible and necessary to preserve the beauty Romanticism unveiled while also returning to a foundation it neglected. We can affirm emotion without idolizing it. We can explore self without exalting it. Because when emotion is paired with wisdom, when feeling is tempered by truth, when the soul is rooted in something beyond its own echo chamber, we get not just poetry, but meaning. When emotion walks alone, it wanders. But when it walks beside truth, it leads us home. Romanticism gave us a lot of powerful tools: introspection, imagination, emotional honesty. But tools can both build or destroy. The real question is, what do we do with them? The danger isn't just that we feel too much, it's that we obey our feelings without question. And when emotion becomes the standard, we lose our bearings. Conscience becomes negotiable. Character becomes performative. And growth is traded for comfort. But what if the true measure of maturity isn't how deeply we feel, but how consistently we choose the good? What if self-expression matters less than self-governance? There is a deeper kind of strength, the kind that doesn't scream to be heard, but quietly does what's right, even when it's inconvenient, even when it doesn't feel good, especially when it doesn't feel good. Romanticism asks us to explore the self, but wisdom asks us to define it. Romanticism urges us to express ourselves, but discipline urges us to master ourselves. Romanticism tells us to listen to our heart, but sometimes the heart needs to be corrected, not coddled. So what does all this mean for us? It means holding ourselves to a higher standard than how we happen to feel today. It means resisting the urge to turn emotion into identity. It's recognizing that truth is not something we manufacture, it's something with which we align. That's not repression, that's resilience. That's how we grow. That's how we build lives and relationships and communities that actually last. George Herbert put it like this: "Who would have thought my shriveled heart could have recovered greenness?" You don't get that kind of renewal by simply wallowing in your feelings. You get it by being reshaped, recentered, realigned. Romanticism let us feel, but the next step, the braver step, is choosing what's right, even when it feels hard. That's how you move from beauty to goodness. That's how you become whole. So, where does this leave us? It leaves us with both a challenge and an invitation. A challenge to examine where our lives have become dominated by fleeting feelings, and an invitation to step into something more enduring. It's not enough to feel right, we must be right. It's not enough to speak truth, we must seek the truth. Feelings matter, but they don't define you. Perception shapes you, but it doesn't save you. And truth? Truth doesn't care how you feel about it. That's what makes it dependable. Romanticism gave us the tools to look inward. Now it's up to us to look outward and upward and rediscover the strength and sanity of absolutes, of timeless truths, of foundations that remain firm even when our moods and motivations do not. So the next time your heart whispers, "This must be true because I feel it," let your mind ask, "But is it?" Truth without love becomes tyranny, but love without truth becomes chaos. Until next time, I'm Alan, and this is Perfectly Poetic. Remember, when the world tells you to trust your heart, maybe ask your brain to weigh in first, and possibly your conscience. And maybe even a dead poet or two.